Ready to roll? Ready to roll. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making audio recording, providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking. Move on to the agenda. Welcome to you all. Appointment of substitutes.
Chair, we don't have any substitutes with us this evening. We do have apologies, though, from Councillor Louis Stephen.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, none recording. Any public participation? No. Fine. We'll move on to item number 4, minutes of the previous meeting. We can go through them page by page, please, and if there's any issues, just give me a shout. 1, 2, 3. Happy with those? We'll sign those as a true and accurate record, please, Julian. Thank you. Item number 5, welcome to Doug Henderson from Bereavement Services. Can you please present your report?
Thank you. Good evening, all. So I'm just going to give you a quick review of what we've been up to over in Bereavement Services since I started in Feb 2020. I've looked at the service in 7 different categories. I'll run through them quickly. Communications internally and externally, staffing, structure and recruitment, infrastructure, fees and charges, memorial options, environment and community. So under communications internally and externally, we created a new soft brand logo to give the service a unique identity within the wider council, new standalone website with e-commerce, new signage across both Asford and St John's, including a new crematorium main sign. I've been meeting with funeral directors and developed much better working relationships with them since then. A new stonemasons approval list with a newer process that's been councillor supported, and a greatly improved working partnership with all the local crematorium since the pandemic and beyond. Staffing, structures and recruitment. There were 2 issues here that I've addressed. The first one was we created a new role, which was an Ops 2 combined role, which combines cremating with chapel and outdoor works. This removed the need for any other of the roles that were previously there, including removing all the Ops 1 posts. It also immediately improved succession planning and resilience because we had more grave diggers and more cremators straight off the bat by doing that. And of course, that was majorly important within the pandemic to have that breadth and depth of trained staff. I then restructured the team, removing one of the supervisory roles and promoted the other one up to a PTC from a PTB. So he now forms a proper deputy to my role. It made a saving doing that as well. We then moved on to removing agency. We had a massive agency demand at the crematorium, and we've saved quite a lot of money by removing it altogether. Also, it wasn't really addressing the ground maintenance. It needed a wider sort of view on that. We've changed recruitment process simply by getting permission to use Indeed, which is a far better platform, along with WM Jobs, for recruiting those Ops 2 roles. A lot of the Ops 2 people struggle with the sort of complexities and the length of the application process, and they don't really require that level of detail. And we basically, I took the time to reset the staff's view of customer support, refocus them on making sure they support the public, the FD, stonemason suppliers and other council departments, and they're more flexible than they are inflexible now, which was the reverse when I started. Moving on to infrastructure. There was quite a bit done in 2018. We have got a market-leading music system, Obitus. The offices were set up, accessible toilets, revamped chapel, carpets and paint job. Since 2020, redecorated, refurnished the funeral director's waiting room, redecorated, refurnished the staff change rooms. Both have been done in-house by my team to keep the costs down. New exit granite sign, Ashwood, new Worcester crematorium entrance sign on the building canopy, repainted the ornate metalwork outside the chapel, repainted the exit canopy, repainted all the perimeter fencing, new tarmac entrance road complete, exit patches, and half the car park's been re-tarmacked, the other half didn't need it. We've got new body storage and the bears to put their bodies into the cremators, which we required because the previous one was a mechanical one and it kept breaking down. It just wasn't fit for purpose. We bought new digger, tractor, trailer, etc. New burial equipment and greens to improve the aesthetics of the burial process for families. Upgraded the PC units on the cremators. They're more efficient now, so less gas being used, and they're slightly better on the emissions. Not massively, but they're circa 1997. There's not a lot I can do with them. They were also operating on Windows 95 on one laptop, which once it broke, we would have not been able to access the software. So we've rectified all that and given them another lease of life. And the last IT project, we've linked up the database Bacchus with the music system, and the FDs can now book via their own portals, so they can see when there's availability, make a booking, which reduces the admin in the office and it really sort of eases their way, which is one of the issues that we need to sort of keep them happy. Fees and charges. I couldn't work out how some of the fees and charges were got to in the past. I think there's been a lot of changes made over the years. The application of cost of living increases, etc., which is fine. But we reset the whole thing in 2021, back to basics, building them from the bottom up so we can say, right, that's the product, that's the maintenance cost, that's the lease year and everything else. Which was timely because the CMA report talked about a lack of clarity, Competitions and Marketing Authority report on the funeral. It was more directed at funeral directors, but because we always display our fees and charges as a public body. But this is one step better because we can explain to any family member exactly how we've got to a price, and that leasing renewals are at 50% of the original, whereas before they were all over the place. So we are the cheapest for cremating in the local area, except for Hereford. I can't beat theirs. I think that's important. So we've got that draw coming in, but on burials, we're at quite a premium. We're up near the top because space is a premium, and people who want to bury it at Ashwood are not going to go anywhere else. It's not like cremations, which is a bit of a heave-ho. Memorial options, there hadn't been any new ones for years. First thing I did was spoke to one of our suppliers, Oddlings, and introduced 6 new memorial options: granite bird baths, granite seats, hearts, and we've created a display area in the ground so people can actually see what they're going to get and see the kind of artwork on there. We then moved to our own, so we got the anodised gold leaves and the tree, which is lit up on the front opposite the building, because there's not a lot I can do with that building, but I can draw your attention away from it by putting nice memorials and stuff around it. So I've done that, and they're doing well, obviously backed up by the shop, online shop. We've added 2 further memorials which aren't for building a surplus. One was when we discovered that there was a mass baby burial under one of the lawns from the circa the 40s, so we've added one bought from our own coffers to mark that area permanently, so that people know that they're there, and if they're looking for their family through, their own research, that at least we can draw them to that. And the second one was the Forget-Me-Not garden on the exit as you're leaving, which is on the right-hand side, which is there to allow people a second chance to say goodbye. There are wildflower beds. It's well worth going to see now. They're well established, and they are bespoke, the actual pieces. There's 2 benches to sit on, and a post box shaped as a beehive. It's covered in insects indigenous to our area, and we mulch the notelets that are impregnated with wildflower seeds and plant them, and they're now coming to fruition. So that was a bit of we want to call it a COVID memorial because it works outside of that, but it worked for people with COVID because a lot of people died of cancer as a result of the knock-on effect of COVID. So we don't want to narrow it too much. So that's a nice investment. Moving on to the environment, we've got 70 hectares at Aswood and 8 at St John's. Great green space. Throughout COVID, we saw visitors coming just to use their 30 minutes when we had that weird period. So it's important that we sort of develop that more. So we've been working with the RSPB, with WEG, Worcester Environmental Group. We've got our own bees in the natural burial area. We are now rewilding in a number of sections. We bought our signs from WEG that's been made out of recycled materials from Merck. So we're a little bit of a sort of support for a local charity who are providing us with the signs. We have got a bike shed now as we're trying to push alternative transport. I've launched an information signage project to try to gather all of the different transport options to get to the site to help people. We'll put that on the web and on signs. I'm putting in for electric charging points because in my view, every public facility should have them. We cleared out the brook that cuts through the site, and we've added solar lights to it. And we've just gone for a green flag. We should get our results in July. It's very favourable according to the assessment team, so hopefully. And we've gone for the APSA Cemetery of the Year award as well. Thought I'd double down in 2022. Community-wise, as I said before, we're working with WEG, RSPB. We've got various volunteers, including the beekeepers. But one of the most satisfying ones of recent times is we're working with 20+ ex-servicemen who are cleaning the military headstones that aren't in the Commonwealth grounds. There's 209 that don't sit in the Commonwealth grounds that we've uncovered. There's airmen, there's prisoners of war, all sorts there. So, and because he used to work for some sort of clandestine part of the army, he still has access to databases, and he's providing us with bios of each of the soldiers. We've actually started building that onto the website, so people will be able to actually find this information, which is just adding valuable information to the website. The reason for that is obviously to draw people in, keep them interested in what we're doing. Next steps are predominantly, at the moment for me, St John's. 1.5 to 2 years left of burial space. There's a real need to decide what we're going to do. That commercial opportunity has arisen with the company behind that have left. So I've put in a paper in, and that's working its way up. Any questions? That's all right. Oh.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. But firstly, Douglas, can I say, great paper, brought to life by your presentation. So there's a lot more going on than I read in the paper, which is really positive, and I think you deserve a very good pat on the back. My question would be, 2 questions. First of all, I like the idea of the new website. Does our City Council website link to the new? Excellent, that's good. And my next bit is, it's the next steps piece, because you seem to have dived in, sorted out all the stuff that needed sorting out. My question now is, how do we now draw a bit of breath and say, right, how do we go forward? Because we've been losing money, not losing money, our budget's gone down. Where do we position ourselves in the market now? And I know this is, because I'm a Conservative, so I can be this hard-nosed. It's really difficult, but we make money from unfortunately from people's passings. So how do we situate ourselves in the market against the Fladburys of the world and whatever, such that we become an attractive place for people to come and have a meaningful and loving farewell to their loved ones, without being too hard-nosed about it. So what is that USP that we're going to market, and how do we market it? I know sounds like you've done a lot of it already by talking to the funeral parlours already, and it's a nicer place. It's how do we now do a proper marketing job on that to make sure that people go, you know what? Because I don't think I'm close to ever needing the cemetery at the moment, but I didn't know half of what you've just said, and I don't go to the cemetery because I'm not a local Worcester boy, so therefore I don't have any family that are there. So there's a lot of this I guess the public don't know. How do we make them aware of all the good work that you've done? You're going to tell me you've got a plan now, aren't you? I'm going to love it.
Well, actually, there's quite a lot here. Some of it's commercially sensitive at the moment, obviously, on the facilities review. Okay. But on the St John's, as I say, if I'm looking at a mausoleum, just to be clear, that's the paper I put in. I've got no no reason to not say that now. It's not commercially sensitive. A mausoleum means that we can build onto a brownfield site with less issues around the environment, etc. Because obviously burying requires us digging out the entire site or all the site that we want to use. A mausoleum means that they're basically above ground crypts, and there can be different sizes and different variations. It's something that Europe does all the time, etc. There are places in the UK. No digging required, obviously, so there's lots of benefits, etc. You've immediately got the space you require as a family. There's very little waiting time. Slightly more expensive, but we can work that out over the years. Could give up to 50 years on that site of new life into St John's. In 2 batches of 25, I've worked out we know what the burial rate is at St John's, so we know what we need. We've got about 1.5 to 2 years left there at the moment, which is leaving it tight, absolutely. But there wasn't any options. The thing is, it's landlocked and a railway line on the one side, but now this has suddenly come up. So we need to at least put a proper fist together and really think about it as a councillors, and this is your one opportunity to expand St John's and actually have it directly next to it. Obviously, there's always scope to do something else somewhere else, but I don't think that would work as well as having the whole thing flowing from back to front, because the site behind we can open up and just drive through and maybe exit back onto the A44, is that right? So that's that. So the other side, marketing's an interesting concept in this. I've not worked in bereavement before I came here. I've done lots of business, etc. The website is great, but people don't tend to look your way until they're struck by a loss. Yeah, exactly. Those that have got a family connection will come to us. Our prices are very competitive now. Getting new people in is doing things like the green flag and things, putting us on the map for more than just the basics. We've got a vast amount of wildlife there. For example, I'm putting some picnic tables in areas. People do like walking around, particularly the older part of Aswood. It's beautiful. We've got American redwoods. We've got a vast array of trees. So it's getting that balance, and the rewilding in sections now is working really well. So it's about, I'd call it soft promotion by slightly different outlets, but bringing the community back in a way. Whilst we look at that bigger picture about what we're going to do with the service going forward, which is isn't it? It's in motion, quite far down the road actually in motion. I wish I could say more.
Thank you. And can I just say, I love your passion.
I love the job.
So
I love working for the council. It's great. I've still got the mic on.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I'd like to say I've been to Aswood Cemetery when I first moved to Worcester, not long after, and I've never seen such a well-kept cemetery. I was thinking, my God, these people just love their graves. Well, I mean,
No, there is a bit of that.
It's evident. So that's really nice. Do you currently have a friends group for the cemetery?
No. When I inherited the service in February 2020, I was tasked with looking at a friends group because it basically dissolved, which is a classic scenario when the key volunteer stepped back and there wasn't a replacement. I'm looking at the forum to answer one of your questions from your previous email as well and bringing that back online. But what I have done is decided that setting up a volunteering group with a remit that's council driven isn't the way to go. The way to go is to get volunteers who want to do bits and pieces, like I've got the beekeepers, I've got some old ladies that like to do the nature stuff, I've got the WEG group, I've got the soldiers, and then bring them together and create a friends group based around my volunteers. The forum's slightly different because the forum is represented by some stonemasons, some FDs, and I closed it initially because the mix wasn't right and it needed to be reset, revamped. So I'm looking at the autumn to bring that back online, which gives people the opportunity to feed back in a live forum and ask questions and why have you done this and could you do that?
So I was thinking about something a little bit different than that, whether or not you could find out if there's a local appetite at either cemetery or both, for a friends group that would do things like, maybe tours of the cemetery.
Like touristy kind of.
Yes, because there must be famous people buried in either
Certainly
one.
got every Elgar except Elgar.
But
brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, everyone.
There's probably others.
There are a few, yeah.
And so it makes a
which
nice
we've got
little,
on the website.
you know, find the grave, there's the gravestone. You could have a little tour of, you know, and a friends group that focuses on the people who are
That's a good idea.
buried there. It makes a nice little extra thing, I think.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things we're looking at, there's a company that provides GPS markers that we can put on the back of each of those military headstones. And then that would then be linked to the website, and it would actually draw them to the bio. So they can scan it and be drawn to the bio on the website, which is another way of increasing interest from different areas of society and just similar sort of, I'm fascinated with war, so I'm sure lots of people want other stuff, but
Got
yeah.
two other points. Can I just quickly make two others? So I've seen some really good dramatic productions in cemeteries. I don't know if you've thought about involving the theatres at all. They're good fun.
We had a film done in, I think it was just before COVID landed actually. Some students asked permission and we let them. Didn't seem like a problem. It was all blurred out so that no personal details were exposed. I made sure that was clear, but I thought, you know, in terms of a beautiful place to film, and they were looking at something gothic, can't get much more gothic than a graveyard.
Well, that's right, but so I was involved in, when I stood in London, with a variety of theatre, like events actually. There was a poetry reading in one corner, there was a little mini play in another, there was a choir singing in another part. It was a whole collection of different sort of arts that small groups of people could tour around and stand in front of what was happening, enjoy it, and then move to the next. And you know, you could charge for that. Yeah,
great. I'm writing down. I didn't expect to be writing down stuff. I'm writing down stuff.
And finally, and this might be covered in the green flag, I don't say my ignorance, are your coffins like biodegradable?
Only though, well, every coffin that's cremated has to be made out of certain materials that are as pollution-free as possible.
Yeah,
those in the natural burial area are completely biodegradable, but I forgot to mention, we've shifted all of our two-stroke equipment to battery now. So we've removed all the pollution that's and the noise generated by two-stroke fuel. Obviously, I've still got the digger and that running on diesel, but it's another saving, which I meant to say in here, so I forgot. But yeah.
Just before you come in, Steve, in terms of the green flag submission, I thought a condition of that was going to be that you had to have a friends group. Is that not right?
No, as it turned out, on that front, they were happy enough with my explanation for where I was going, and the sheer breadth of volunteering that I've currently got in operation satisfied that criteria. But I've got plans to do it anyway, so.
Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, echo my colleagues' comments about the work that's been done there. Thank you very much indeed. And I think one of the first things that you tackled probably was, or the start of the website, and that's like which made a big difference. One of the things that we've been discussing at the various income gen meetings is what can we do to improve facilities to make funeral directors be more willing, perhaps, or able to suggest, promote our area as opposed to any other one. And of course, without getting into the business side of issues and such like. I mean, I know you redecorated the funeral directors' rooms there. Is there anything else they're asking for in the first instance?
As cheap as we can get it, which, you know, because obviously they add their prices onto whatever our price is. So we've addressed that on cremations. We're fair, we're competitive, and we sort of sit in the national table in a nice position. The CMA report has forced funeral directors to have to give a benchmark of fees that families can match up. So they've had to become more transparent. A lot of them were in their own ways, but you know, they want what CMA wanted to see was so that families could say, right, burial plus hearse plus X costs this here and Y there, whereas before it was all wrapped up into different prices. So the main thing is just making sure the staff, that the facilities work, that the admin is as smooth as it can be, that we are as flexible as we can be, that we've got our doctors coming in regularly so they can sign the papers off as quickly as possible to get that turnaround, which we've got daily. competitive pricing, and that we just look after them as best we can. Which one of the first things I did was actually go out to their facilities and speak to them, some of the smaller private firms and some of the bigger ones as well. So yeah, it's a work in progress. It never stops, and they do give feedback. They're comfortable to say, this worked, this didn't. So we try and learn from that as well, best we can. Having Obitus, the music systems, is an important part of that, because there's an expectation of families that they can have anything they like music-wise, and it has a vast library, so that really helps, which was something that was done well before my time, which was a good move.
Thank you for that. And I just want to ask, please, you're talking about electric vehicle charging points there. How many you got? And not open to misuse at all, is it?
Right, so I should have said I want to. I haven't got any yet. I've got electric equipment, obviously, which is charged around the back. I think if we have at least 1 point or 2 points there, then it lends itself to people coming in electric cars. It also enables the staff to consider it as an option as well. It's just, my view is that all of our public facilities with car parks of a certain size, say, should at least have one option. So I've talked to Craig. They've done some tests already on the electrical points within the crematorium to make sure that they can take the charge, which they can, and we're sort of there at that point. Because this Ashwood, and if my plans go forward, St John's will remain in our portfolio for good. There is ways of making each site last a long, long time. There's ways of recovering grave space that's not being utilised at all. I'm not talking about the London model where they actually remove, but there's lots of space still in Ashwood. And as I say, St John's, we have another plan. So we could future-proof the burial side, and the pattern of choice is definitely moving towards cremations as well as the higher number. So we can get the model right for both sites and future-proof the bereavement services for the council. Right.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And anybody else on this side? Just a couple of questions. One, in terms of, you talk about obviously Astral Road having 70 acres and St John's 8, I think it is 70 hectares. Right. So how much land supply have we got in terms of years for Astral Road? Secondly, in 2.7, the income model that you've got is 21-22, where we're going down, and then 22-23 we're going up. And are there any significant reasons why that trend is now going to increase based on your income model?
I don't set to answer point 2, I don't set the targets. I think I like stretch targets, and there's no reason why, with a good wind behind us, we can't make them. So that answers number 2 as best as I can. And number 1 was, what was it again? There's about 15 to 20 years at Ashwood, because there is quite a number of graves that were purchased within the older section and not used at all, and now are out of lease. So we go through a process of obviously making every effort to contact the families in question. And if we can't get hold of them, I'd bring a list to the legal team to make the next steps. But there is also pockets of land that council owns, or that we have an option on, or that we could try for. So.
And the final point is something Steve mentioned. Historically, our relationship with FDs hasn't been great for various reasons. Regarding that, I'm really impressed that you've gone out of your way to try to address some of those concerns. At the end of the day, they're probably the mediators between families, and they make that kind of the decisions. So it's really important. That
it's a strange position, isn't it? They're the gatekeepers to a lot of what we do, and unless a family has a personal reason to come to Ashwood, there's no reason the FDs even mention the site. If they're not particularly pleased with the site, they can just offer Fladbury up, and people don't know where these places are necessarily until they are struck by a bereavement. So it's a question of making sure that our web presence is up there, so in searches we're found. But the FDs are great. I've got leaflets and stuff as well in the pipeline just to pop in their offices, but most people, it's web, isn't it, these days? It's making sure our presence is, which is the only reason we wanted to extract it from the main council site is because it was a little buried. So it's connected up, but it just sits on its own platform, so it's easy to find. That's all it was, just bringing it up to the top, if you will.
And I love all the ideas in terms of opportunities, and especially around reawakening the history that's within those sites, and especially the stories of the peoples and the service.
Exactly.
And, you know, employing different technologies, whether it's QR codes or reality, in terms of some of those tools that you were talking about, just brings that cemetery to life. There's a fine line in terms of, you know, balance of being sensitive to
Exactly, always a difficult one. Yeah.
To the sites and, you know, a commercial operation, but yeah, absolutely.
Just the
Well done.
just the rewilding has been a sensitive journey. You know, some people's perception is that everything should be cut to a snooker table level of grass, when actually biodiversity and the breakdown in the environment is a big issue for all of us. And when you've got 70 hectares of land, it's an opportunity with the right management. I'm still finding my feet. Some people, you know, not happy, and others get it. But there's signs now explaining it. And if somebody finds they've got a grave that is in the rewilding section that they want cut, we will cut it. We will cut a path to it. Of course, they just have to come and speak to us. It's fine.
Yeah, as long as there aren't any photos with people in knee length.
Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Problem. Item 1.1 is a recommendation that the subcommittee note the progress made by bereavement services in enhancing the services provided to customers. Is it noted? Noted. Thank you. Item number 6, local authority housing development company. Shane?
Thank you, Chair. This report is really, I mean, it is a noting report, but there are some thoughts, having, you know, revisited the findings of the ARC report, which I'll come back to. But the members will recall that there was a proposal or discussion around a housing development company and whether or not the council should look to set one up. And there was a parallel movement around developing housing, enabling housing, which we sought a third party, a consultant, to help us explore how we could improve our approach to affordable housing. And it seemed appropriate to tie those two things together. So one of the things that ARC was asked to do when they were appointed to deliver this project was to look at whether a housing development company was the right vehicle for us as a way of taking things forward. This is a short report which really is designed to sort of bring to a conclusion that process. So the Income Generation Committee has contributed financially to this piece of work, and has received a report as indicated when we started the process. I think the report, having, you know, revisited, so there was a communities committee last week, or was it the week before, in which we talked about this in quite some detail, and the sense of that meeting, which I attended partly to understand what the views there in that committee would be, was that, you know, perhaps we could be a bit more progressive in our thinking about this, and be a bit more creative in our approach to developing housing within the authority. And so the report here, which simply in rather bold terms say that I've stated that this, in paragraph 3.1, is not the right thing to do at the moment. It is quite a progressive report in looking at a range of various other options which we might explore, and doesn't, you know, it doesn't simply state this is not for us. It talks primarily about this not being the right time. So it talks about it being a time-consuming, resource-intensive approach, and unlikely to add much to the delivery framework. But they are very interested in promoting ideas around joint arrangements and risk sharing and so on and so forth. So I think there is still quite a lot of work that can be done towards determining the right vehicle for us to go forward with it. But as things stand, the idea that a housing development company is the right way to go, ARC have stepped away from. And of course, they are the experts. We appointed them to undertake this work. So therefore, my recommendation is that we accept their advice and not pursue the idea of setting up a direct housing provider company at the moment, work on these other options. And I think they had a lot of really interesting things to say about strategic thinking, about being clear about what it is we're trying to do with affordable housing, where we want to get to, and how we need to be much more progressive in terms of engaging with partners, working with registered providers, and so on and so forth. So I think there's an awful lot more to do, but this report, I think, brings us to the point of saying, well, let's not pursue a housing development company at this stage.
Thank you. I'll open the item to the floor. Steve?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we were both there at the communities and Shane as well at the communities meeting, and there was a bit of cross feeling about how we should progress, and I think there was some votes almost in favour of continuing to look at or abstentions to this actual report in relation to proceeding with our own development company or an arm's length development company. But I think everybody's really did understand the feeling of the risk involved to public funding to go down that line. So I would maintain my view that in relation to this report, we do accept as what it said insofar as we don't proceed with our original thoughts on this, but continue, as it says in the report, to look at the other strands that we could follow.
Thanks, Steve. Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Similar to Steve's comments, disappointing, I suppose, because I was quite a supporter of this idea. But you take advice when it's best given. It hasn't closed the door to other opportunities, and I think there are other opportunities out there working with local housing associations. We know Sanctuary have got a big footprint in this city and are keen to talk and work with us. So we just look for other opportunities because as well as developing an income from it, we're also delivering social housing, which is, you know, we win both sides of the coin, which is always a good thing. So yeah.
Thanks, Chris. Councillor Sarah, Jill?
Chair, I just wondered if there was a chance to go back to this council developed housing. When would that be? If they're saying you could do it, but not now, when is it we look at it again? Is there a time frame for that?
Shane?
Through you, Chair. There's no specified time frame at the moment because the important thing, they really very strongly emphasise thing is the need to develop a strategic approach to affordable housing. And that's what we're missing at the moment. So the timetable will be dictated by that strategy and the development of it. And alongside that, the development of an action plan. So once we've decided what our policy approach is and our strategic approach, we then need to set out the steps we would take to implement that strategic approach. And as part of that, the timetable will then be developed. And I still think that a housing company should be one of the things which are looked at as part of that plan. But we it's going to take 6 months to get to a strategic housing position, and then we can start to look at it again.
I just wondered if it was months, years, or decades, that's all.
Through you, Chair, hopefully not decades.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, similarly, I suppose the realisation of obviously where we are and where we need to get to in order to get to a stage where we're sufficiently confident, I suppose, in terms of knowledge, resources and skills in-house to take that first step. I think that we're a little bit away from that. There's probably a couple of steps to go in between, notwithstanding obviously the housing strategy and the position, and then us getting a little bit of courage by working with other providers in terms of that, and then gaining some of that knowledge. Then that will give us the understanding of where we are placed. So I kind of accept grudgingly the report, even though I was kind of dead keen on this progressing, but realised that there are other opportunities that this report has highlighted, and certainly in terms of realising our own land value, what little we have left of it, and what controls that we've got, just maximising those, whether that would be through the working really closely with the chair of planning, with the chair of PED, and having a united strategy in the way we go forward, and especially with the amount of development that's going on within the city centre, what opportunities lie where we can fit in, and certainly from this committee's point of view, where we can provide that residual income that could provide services. And as Councillor Mitchell said, the whole aim was that we build social housing, get that income and then reinvest into those services, saving on our housing benefit bills, etc., etc. So it's a win-win situation, but there's a couple of steps to get in between. So, yeah, so it's 1.1 to note the report of the art consultancy on options for council-led housing development and the potential for housing development company as an appropriate vehicle for progressing these options. Right? So noted. Noted. Item number 7, annual and Q4 performance report. Mark?
The committees has the remit followed by the graphs that monitor the council's income budget. So if we start off with the individual projects, Shane could pick up commercial strategy and income strategy.
Thank you. See what did you see what I was saying? I told you.
They call that a hospital pass.
And I call that upward delegation, which is fine. The commercial strategy, welcome, because I was going to come in and comment on this anyway. One of the things what's really interesting about Doug's presentation is if you think back to where we were 2 to 3 years ago, slightly longer perhaps, when we developed the commercial strategy, was all about bringing that kind of thinking into the way we were delivering services and demonstrating the fact that providing good quality services to the public and being commercial in our approach aren't incompatible. And the commercial strategy is very much about that. It was about saying, well, how can we deliver things? And it continues on its way, but it needs to change slightly now because, as we know, because the Treasury has sort of shut the gate on purely investing for commercial purposes or to generate an income, we have to think much more strategically around our, the way that we're developing opportunities. So again, thinking about the previous report in terms of housing, how are we using opportunities for development, which will at the same time generate an income for the council? So it can be commercial in the way that they're doing things. Now, we're progressing with the Future High Streets Fund, so that's one of the areas that we're looking to do that. And out of that, there's the potential for some domestic properties to come on stream. The Towns Fund as well has a significant component of residential elements to it, which equally will support our bid to increase the housing in the area and also potentially generate income. And we've got 2 other ones to look at, the Levelling Up Fund, which we've been exploring elements of that too, as to whether or not those are areas where we can, by renovation and development within the city centre, produce a return which means that the council is able to afford those, but also to contribute to its overheads. The one that's more interesting for me is the Shared Prosperity Fund, because this is a revenue thing. We know that we're going to get 2.9 million spread over several years, but what we're going to require to do in return for that additional income is yet to be understood. So all of these things are part of what we're trying to do at the moment, and I think as we move into this coming year, we need to rethink our commercial strategy and rewrite that a little bit to focus on development, and the remit of this committee needs to become part of that process as well. What is it saying? What is it trying to do? So I'd like to reset the deadline for that, to bring it to the end of the year and come back in the autumn with a revised commercial strategy and a revised approach. In terms of income strategy delivery, this is about trying to set our income targets and drive our way forward. As part of this strategy, we have, to address a question which came up earlier, taken an approach which is progressive. So when I arrived and started working with Mark on this, we were in a position where our income budgets were always behind our actuals. And whenever we more or less set the budget to what the actual had been the previous year. Well, since then, we've tried to take an approach which uses the past 3 years average and sets a budget which is progressive against that. So hence the budget for bereavement services is now in advance of last year's income. Obviously, the last 2 or 3 years have been a bit strange, so we'll have to see how that works out. But we continue to try and be progressive in the way that we do that. business rates, as I've said, is going to become an interest of greater focus as we go forward. We're not now expecting a reset of our business rates, so that means that what we've built in terms of our growth in our business rates, we'll be able to keep for another year, which is good news. But come April 2024, I think then there might very well be a reset, and we'll need to think hard about that. So we will reset those targets as we go through. Thirdly, sports facilities. I have now had a request from the hockey centre to agree that they've not yet reached practical completion stage, but can we vary the terms of that so that we can actually progress to a point where they get the loan, which means that they get their bridging finance and we start to get income back from the project, which is partly what we were trying to do in the first place. So it's taken a long time to get to this point, but the centre is in use and it's been very well received, and we've had good feedback about it. Now, the other ones, the all-weather pitch was at Communities Committee, so that was progress, and we will move forward on that one. And I want to wait just a little bit to see how that progresses before coming back to this question of further five-a-side pitches against the leisure centre. So we'll come back to that at some stage, but we'll just go forward a little bit on the all-weather pitch and see where we get to, see what kind of response there is to that before we take on the next step. We've already talked about the development of housing enabling strategy. So that's pretty much where we are at the moment. Mark, do you want to? Sorry, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'll just talk through then each of the income graphs, which, having reached the end of the year, provides us quite a clear trend, and just touch on the current start to the new year as well. Riverside related income, as we've discussed before, this main relates to properties at the Riverside, and therefore is a stable source of income. Next brings us on to the Guildhall. Obviously, during COVID, the income from this building was hit quite significantly, and hence the green line is well below the budget. We then had the spike in Q3 because the lockdown restrictions were lifted and people came through with a lot of pent-up demand for bookings, hence it's quite a considerable shift there. That meant that the year as a whole, we generated 63,000, lower than the budget, but compared to where we thought we might be earlier on in the year, that's probably quite a significant improvement. In terms of the start to the new year, things have still been fairly slow, but hopefully that will start to pick up. Trade waste, one of the few positives in the pandemic was that the trade waste service managed to continue to operate all the way through, albeit on a reduced level. Businesses were closed or customers requested fewer collections. As you can see, the gap between the budget and the actuals did reduce during the year. We had overall income for the year of 725,000. That's actually the highest that the service has generated, which is a considerable achievement. It's still well below the budget, but that's because we've yet to see main big contract with the university really take on I would call a full operating year. It started just before the pandemic started and has therefore operated for most of the time we've had it at a reduced level. Hopefully in the coming year that will start to bring that to fruition. Similarly, the extra charges for higher weights with the rugby club. So we should see that gap against the budget start to narrow, and that will give us a truer idea of the ongoing income level. But as I said, we shouldn't lose sight of that 720. Next, garden waste. Again, just carrying on the theme we've talked about before, that this service continued to grow during the pandemic, with people not wanting to go to the refuse sites themselves. And against a fairly challenging budget anyway, we'd already budgeted for a higher than inflationary increase in the And so far, the signs are that those new accounts are being retained and renewed, which is good news. So once again, the income achieved of 542,000 is the highest that Garden Waste has achieved. Property, again, this mainly relates to the two large sites at the hospital that we invested in, and all the other commercial sites around the city. Positive aspect through the pandemic was that we didn't have any shortfalls in income. The tenants did retain paying, which was good, so we didn't have any shortfall there. Slight shortfall against budget because one or two rent reviews were settled lower than we might have expected, but given the probably to be expected. Car parks, obviously the most significant income stream for the council, and one that was hit during the pandemic. The positive aspect was that as the restrictions lifted, the income increased and started to narrow the budget. So by Q4, we were at 656,000, which was about 90% of the budget. That had improved on the previous quarters when we were running at more like 80%. Since then, in April and May, that 90% pattern has continued, probably reflecting the fact that people engage more in online shopping. People are still working at home for some of the week. I think lots more people have come back into the office, but working at home is a feature of working life. So it remains to be seen, I think, where that parking income will settle. But to put a 90% achievement in context, if that were to continue for the rest of this year, then looking at the budgets, that's going to be a shortfall in income of 300,000. So it is quite important. Holds. Bereavement income, which we've already touched on, obviously we had the spike during the year affected by the pandemic. Since then, it's settled down into a more regular pattern between 350 and 400,000 per quarter, with the gap closed against the budget. It's worth noting that the budget has been reduced compared to previous years before February, but we're clearly now getting closer to a more predictable run rate of income. And then development management, so income from planning. Again, operated fairly consistently through the pandemic, with a small dip and some of that demand coming back in the Q4. The spike much earlier on in 2021 was the lowest Moor Wharf application. So the full year ended at 673,000, more than the previous year, but still slightly below the budget. And then neighbourhood income. You'll recall that this is the income we generate from services that we operate mainly for the county council. So things like jetting of drains, transportation of street sweepings, and so on. The income has reduced year on year, in spite of the lockdown, and that's because the county council had some of the contracts. But we continue to receive quite significant requests, hence we're still generating in the last year. And I think that's the last one. So happy to take any questions, Jen.
Bill and then Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I had a request from one of my residents as to whether or not the commercial waste site licences, so not the collections, but going to the site, could be increased from 6.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Beg your pardon. So I had a request from one of my residents who operates a garden landscaping business. Said he gets 6 licenses, he's allowed to buy, and he's happy to buy, 6 licenses from the council to get rid of his commercial waste, but that's the limit. And he wants to buy as many as he needs, otherwise he goes to Malvern. So is there a reason why this can't be increased?
An interesting question. But to be honest, I don't know the answer, but to clarify, by 6 licenses, do we mean that he wants 6 bins?
6 visits to the dump. He goes to the dump.
Okay. I don't know. I'll have to find out and get back to you. Obviously, we don't run the local refuse centre.
Bilford Road.
So yes. So I suspect it's the council. So trade waste service collects it from
Yes,
businesses
yes.
and then takes it to the disposal centre.
That's one more question, Chair. Does that mean then that that any income generated from that service would go to county?
From Chris and then Steve.
Oh, sorry, yeah, my question. Car parking. Are you going to bring it up in any other business? Reference the app thing?
I was.
Yeah, in which case I'll defer to my far better looking and intelligent colleague.
Yeah, thank you. Only in relation again to the issue of trade waste. And appreciate what has been said already. Do we do any marketing? I mean, we've got the, as you've mentioned, the university has been tied, but we must know. No, I say must know. Presume we know companies that don't use our systems. Do we do any marketing of them to try and get them on board at all?
Through you, Chair. We have recently had a change of staff at the depot. The new person who's come into the role is quite experienced in doing marketing and is quite keen to progress that. I think we've got to be mindful that the trade waste industry is probably quite unusual in that businesses that sign contracts with commercial operators then find they're quite difficult to get out of. So I've seen this from the other side that typically those contracts will give quite short notice periods when you can give notice. So if you decide in November that actually you want to change and you'd like to go with the council, your incumbent provider will then tell you, oh no, it's not time for you to change it. You've got to talk to us in the 2 weeks in August that your contract allows. And so you've then got to be quite disciplined and organised to remember come the 15th of August that you're able to give that notice. But having said that, yes, we're quite keen. And one of the quirks that the city council has, like other local authorities, we don't have to charge VAT on trade waste, whereas obviously all the commercial private operators do, which means for small businesses operate below the VAT threshold, that's then a 20% saving to them. So we'd be in that area of small business, albeit the income we would get from those would be obviously lower, but there is an opportunity there.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Is there an option for my garden waste man to have you collect his waste then? As a small business?
Through you, Chair. Again, to clarify, before you said it was commercial waste, so in fact it's garden waste. Right, okay. Whether we would collect 6 bins, again, I would have to find out, but certainly in the fees and charges, there is the option for people to buy an extra bin, whether an extra bin. But certainly, we receive the revenue from garden waste.
Sorry, through you, Chair. I really, it would have be something on a much bigger scale, and it would be a new thing, not just having extra bins. Every week you'd be filling up more than one bin. So anyway, it doesn't matter. It's just, it's a suggestion.
Is he, I mean, probably an item or a question for a different committee, but is he running a commercial operation out of his house?
So he's a commercial landscape gardener, which is why I was saying it's commercial waste. But yeah, that's fine. Okay, I'll put it to a different committee.
As a suggestion, if you want to give me his details, we'll contact him. Options.
Thank you.
Any other questions and comments on this item? For noting, I believe. Shane.
Through you, Chair. Just one thought that I mentioned about developing the commercial income strategies for the autumn committee. And one of the things I want to do is to develop the scrutiny role that the committee has. So, for instance, the discussion we had earlier about bereavement services, that we could look at some of the other services and in more detail and understand what the pressures and problems are. Would it be a good idea to have trade waste as one of the areas to look at?
Personally, I don't think this is a scrutiny committee. I think this is a committee to generate ideas and generate income. I'm not adverse to it, but I'd hate the bulk of our activity to be scrutinising the various income streams as opposed to identifying new income streams and generating income for the council. But I'm not adverse to it. It's just a balance. I'm looking at the chair because it's his workload. But
I think what Shane kind of alluded to earlier in terms of the shifting focus of this committee, I think we need to have a serious discussion on where we're kind of going in terms of this committee. We're limited by, obviously, the amount of financing that we get under the current arrangements of the public board loan rates in terms of how much development or purchasing that we can do. So I think we need a strategic rethink as part of that now. My colleague Steve mentioned that actually, rather than a scrutiny committee, we are an income management committee, where we kind of look at how, if there is any other efficiencies that we can gain, and in terms of that, although not quite a scrutiny committee, but it kind of falls in that same category. So if it means that we can look at these in terms of maximising revenue, scrutiny in that perspective, then that's probably the context I'll take it in. Steve?
Yeah, if it means a way forward for us to, it is the worst, isn't it, scrutinise, look at ways and means in which we can either improve income generation or savings by looking at just that bit further into what's actually going on and what the operation is, then I think, yeah, probably all for benefit. But it's like you say, we shouldn't get too bogged down with the minutiae of each paper that comes to us. We're talking about income gen at the end of the day.
Probably the answer to that is, yeah, we'll add it in there to realise if there are opportunities we are missing.
Yeah, I will discuss that with the relevant officers. But what I think the point I was driving at was that what Doug has shown is the extent to which we're being commercial in our approach, and it would be I think very interesting to have some steer in terms of this committee as to how commercial we should be in other areas of the business, and apply that kind of analysis and thought to drive some of that activity rather than passively receive it or scrutinise it or criticise it. It was about actually giving a strategic direction to income generation.
On that basis, I'm supportive, because I didn't cover it, but the Riverside is developing with the fish pass. Is that somewhere that I think that's going to become a popular place? It's getting very heavily marketed. Is there an opportunity there to generate income? And you've heard me say it before, but there is nowhere to have a coffee or a drink on the west side of the river.
Is there any pitches that we can sell on a commercial rate? I mean, I think we've been talking this for a number of years now, haven't we? In terms of maximising our opportunities in the riverside. I mean, the other point is, I mean, that a lot of the knowledge that Doug displayed there in terms of his passion and enthusiasm and his previous business knowledge that is brought into this environment. Obviously, there's a key example there and a shining light for other departments to follow suit and learn off his experience. Yeah. So that was one for noting that the Income Generation Subcommittee note the Council's annual quarter four performance for 21-22. Noted. Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think this was, well, we discussed quite recently, and I think you gave me the go-ahead to just quickly discuss here the idea of promoting a Worcester City app in relation to, particularly at the start, initially, car parking. And I know that we've just had the other app come in, but of course it doesn't take on.
I have it.
You've got, the man's got it. Yeah, so what we've been looking at and what we were talking about, if I'm right, the ballpark figure for paying Ringo is the likes of 100,000 a year. Is it something that we could look at and decide whether or not we could take on that same responsibility, have that app for Worcester City itself? Obviously, somebody running it for us, the app itself, but the idea would be that we take any profit, and we're not paying £100,000 to a third party for running that service. So that's the idea. It wasn't my idea. You know, I think that Andy Stafford sort of raised it some time ago. But I mean, what he was looking at, once we have the parking app, we could then introduce it, marketing to third parties and such like. But I appreciate, I won't go too deeply into that now because we've got the other app that's already come in. Whether we could amalgamate, I don't know. Whether we could do our own thing, I'm not sure. But I'm just looking to the committee to see if the will is there to sort of promote it, to have officers look at it initially to decide whether it's a goer or not.
I mean, I'll put it out to the floor first and then have my say on it. Does anybody want to speak on Steve's suggestion?
I think it must be good to look at it. Can get different apps that will, I don't know if you're thinking of this, but also direct you, say, to certain shops that have offers or certain events, and it'll, if it knows you're in the vicinity because it's tracking you, go here, you've got special offers, or go there. And the idea of keeping people in the city of Worcester longer, which is one of the objectives of the day, would be helped by that.
Chris?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I've been banging along about an app because it was my idea. And we seem to have got this Discover app, which sort of has that. I don't know how we generate any money out of it, though. Or are we paying to be a to be on it? Because you go on it, it says bars and pubs, and it brings up the list of the bars and pubs here, bar 23, black and white. I'm assuming they're paying to advertise on here, but we don't get any revenue out of it. So we sort of linked into an app as opposed to creating our own, which we would get the revenue from. So it's costing us as opposed to, which was not where I had my plan. And I doubt we'll be able to put parking on this. No, change Sage nod, shake of his head from Sage. So, yeah. So, but it's not our own.
Okay, I mean, maybe we'll call that item in. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, if we decided to go down the route of an app and paid a third party provider to provide it for us and have not looked at the wider benefit for it, then that decision needs to be looked at. But I'm going back to Steve's point. Absolutely, these are exactly the things that we're tasked to do. And if there's a saving to be made, well, why wouldn't we explore it? I mean, we are up against Ringo or whatever the other app is, and these are nationally known apps. They've got significant millions of pounds of investment behind them, and they're seamless in terms of wherever you are. They have software where you just, as soon as you open up, they realise where the nearest car park is, and it's just couple of taps and you're there, kind of thing. And they send you reminders when you're near your expiry time of your ticket. So if all those, bearing in that mind, if we can make it as closely match as that, it's been done before. It's not not out of the bounds of possibility within us, and we should explore it. Add that to the report. Okay. And are there any other items of business? No. I think we've got one other item of business in closed session.